Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Human Realness podcast, spotlighting badass conversation wranglers with the refinement to invoke thought. Through every experience, either from kindness or from pain, we believe these realness stories navigate a way for us to include rather than exclude. And we do that with kindness, empathy, advocacy, and love. My guest here today, we have a little bit of a history, and they celebrate their badassness by teaching us more about Ecuadorian culture and what it's like to come here and live here in the U.S.
Yes.
Antonella Zavala Marcks. Is that the full? What's the full name? Give me
It
the full
is.
name.
It
Okay.
is. So before I actually got married, my full name was Grace Antonella Zavala Moran. So I actually kept Zavala because in Ecuador, we're very proud of family, especially, our last name.
Mm-hmm.
So when I transitioned to be married to Corey, I was like, I'm keeping my dad's last name. Like, it's like a thing. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be Antonella Zavala Marcks. And Corey's like, and you pronounce your middle name? And I'm like, yeah, I'm proud. Like, that's just how proud we are and how family oriented we are back home.
Yeah.
So,
I love it. And we've got our margaritas,
Oh,
having a little bit of a cocktail. Is this not a siesta? This wouldn't be a siesta.
No, that would
right?
definitely not be a siesta. Those are like at 3 p.m., siestas, 3 p.m.
Siesta,
till
3 p.m.
6,
Oh.
That's
What do you do at a siesta?
So we just rest after we work, which back home is usually till around 2, and then you sleep till 5, and then you have dinner with your family afterwards. Yeah, it's nice to have
I'm
siestas.
in the wrong country.
Definitely. We don't have no siestas here.
Well, I'll tell a little bit about the
Yes.
history. So you and I, we work together in
correct.
staffing and recruiting, temporary staffing, industrial staffing in the Kansas City metro area. And so I had interviewed you for an opportunity, and you came on board as one of our team members, and you have done so well in the talent acquisition space and field, and you've become really quite an influence in just the Kansas City area, especially with the Latina, the Hispanic, Latinx community, Ecuadorian community. And I first want to start out because I think you have such a fascinating story about what brought you here, because you started going to school here, and tell us a little bit about that journey, because I think it's fascinating how you just navigated this independence from Ecuador, from South America, all way up into Central and Northern America. So tell us all about it.
Okay, perfect. I'm ready. So when I was 13, I think we have, and just so you know, we have big quinceañeras. So when I was 13, I was getting ready to have my big quinceañera.
That's the big celebration, coming to be a woman. Okay.
Yes. And I was like, I don't want a big party. Like, Dad, send me like out of the country. I just want to travel and see what's out there, besides home. Yeah. And my dad's like, okay, well, let's send you to an English course. And I went up to Bournemouth in England at 13 years old by myself for 3 months.
13 years old by yourself.
Yes. And, when you're like young, you're so fearless. So I remember, like, now I will be petrified to get by myself on a plane like that age.
Most 13-year-olds would have been petrified.
Yes. But I was like, my dad was crying at the airport in Miami, and he put me on the plane, and I was just like calling with the pay phones when I got to Heathrow Airport. And I'm like, Mom, I made it. I'm waiting for the taxi. And I'm like 13. And my mom's like crying, telling my dad, why did you let her go? And it just showed me a different world. And I just started wanting to be out to learn different cultures. I actually met one of my old friends from Brazil, and it was crazy. Like, my mom is very religious, and that's part of being, from South America. And she's like, man, God gave you an angel, because this friend brought her dad. So throughout those 3 months, I would take the bus with her and her dad. And then I came back to Ecuador after 3 months. And I was like, I want to go to college to America. Like, I want to go to a different country. I want to experience, it's the American dream. It's great. And
let me pause. So you went over there to learn English.
Yes.
Did you learn English in 3 months? Or did you already know a little bit?
No, they call me the yes girl in the house, because I would say yes to everything. so they wanted, because I didn't know. My English was like 2 to 2 over a 10, like 2 to 10, maybe.
2 out of 10?
2 out of 10.
That's
That's pretty
That
bad.
wasn't good.
No, that was definitely not good. And I remember my host mom always coming to ask me if I wanted to eat. And I would have already eaten out of the house. And I would say always yes. And then she would bring me food. And I'm like, no, no. And then she's like, but you say yes. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't want to be rude. So I just kept saying yes to everything. So, yeah. So he helped me a little bit, I think, kind of getting out of my shelf.
So you were really full in England because you ate
a lot. Yes, my host mom was great, and she would always be like, "Do you want to eat? Do you want to eat?" And I kept saying yes all the time to everything. Yes, 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 yes.
So that, and then you go back.
Yes, so I went back, and I think I traveled a couple more times. And then it came the time that I was about 17, 18, getting out of high school. And my last trip was to Santa Barbara, California when I was 15. And I actually stayed there for 6 months. 6 months at least?
Okay.
Yeah, 6 months. And my host mom was actually from Mexico, and she was living in California, but she was very nice. And she's like, we can't speak Spanish. You got to learn English. So she would always speak to me in English, and it was great. It was great. And after that, I went back home. And I was like, you know what? I want to go to college into the U.S., especially because schools back home, if you want to get a good education for university, is as expensive as going to school here. So I was like, yeah, so it's really expensive. And that's one of the things that I guess in Ecuador is kind of hard. If you have public education, you're probably not getting very, very good education. It's just one of the negative, I guess, or bad things or sad things about being from an undeveloped country. But anyways, I was blessed enough that my parents were able to help me out. And I came to the States. Actually, no, I applied to 15 schools. I didn't even know what schools I was applying.
Yeah.
I didn't, I was just like, I want to go to America.
Yeah.
And I remember getting accepted for Missouri Valley College. And it was like
Missouri Valley.
Valley College. Yes.
I didn't even...
Yes, that's what I went to school for too. Yeah. And it was like 75% scholarship, which I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. So
what was the draw to that one?
So yes, I'm getting there.
Oh.
So it was between Missouri Valley and Lindenwood, which is up on St. Charles.
Lindenwood, I heard. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is going to go back to how you kind of have to be diverse on your website. But I go into the Lindenwood website, and I know that's not true now, but at the time, I go to the website and it's all green for one. And all the people there were wearing cowboy hats and, it was just not attractive to me as an international student.
Were they just all white, look the same?
Yes.
Okay.
And I was like, oh no, I can't go there. Like, I don't know. I thought like maybe horses or something. I don't know. I was very young. And
clearly you didn't see any representation of you.
Exactly. Right. And then I go to the Missouri Valley website, and it was orange and purple. I will never forget. It was just so attractive. And then their main page was full of international students.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I was like, oh my gosh, I want to go there. And it was a smaller school, and I'm used to like smaller towns. So I was excited. I accepted the scholarship, and I was ready to go. And then I didn't know. Land in Kansas City, Missouri, drive to Missouri, like Marshall, Missouri. And then I'm like, oh, there's nothing.
You're still by yourself. You don't know anyone.
No, I don't know anyone. I just got on the plane and I was like, I'm going. And it was literally like just nothingness when I got here. And obviously my last experience was Santa Barbara, California. And now I'm like in Kansas City, Missouri, going through. And I was
experiencing some diversity in Santa Barbara, California. And then all of a sudden it's like, boom.
And I'm like, wow,
nowhere,
this
Kansas,
is the Midwest.
Missouri.
Wow. Yeah. And obviously I was waiting to see like a big amount of international students everywhere because that's what I saw on the website, which once I get there, it was. But, it kind of gave me that perspective, now that I'm like, wow, when I was that young, just seeing that on their website made that much difference for me. And I'm sure that a lot of people see that now when they're applying for jobs, for example. Yeah. So, but that was how I got here first. And then I actually wanted to be... I was getting my criminal justice degree, and one of the experiences, and I think my husband thinks it's funny because I still remember it, but I was welcome here. Like I had a lot of good friends from different countries. It was great, but criminal justice degree wasn't the degree that a lot of foreigner students took. Like foreigner students will be in economics and business, right? So I didn't have a lot of classmates that were diverse like me. So, but it wasn't really an issue. Like people were really nice. But I was sitting one day in one of my classes. I can't remember which class. And I guess I was like, I consider myself a good student.
Yeah.
And I believe I got like a -8. And I will never forget that the guy who was sitting next to me just looks at me when he sees my grade. And he goes, well, that's what foreigners get. We Americans get +A's. And I was like, so, coming to America for an American dream and then seeing people with that perspective just kind of puts you like down,
right.
Like
so
you're
that
like,
was
oh my
the
gosh.
first hit that
The
you
first
kind of
hit.
experienced.
Yeah, the first hit of, wow, maybe I'm not welcome here. Or maybe, there's more people like that think, that we, because we're from different countries, we're less smart or we can't do the same. And, we feel like, well, at least I feel like I respect a lot of the people that were born here and have, and that, Americans, and it doesn't matter to me because I see people as human beings. So for me, it was kind of like a hit because as I was saying before, I grew up in a culture that everyone was welcome,
Yeah. Like, so what was, so I want you to continue the college, but I want us to go back and talk a little bit about the kind of the intersection of culture of what you experienced. But yeah, so A- and he gets an A+.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it was like a hit for me. So obviously I was young and a little bit like, you have that spice, his, like I would say Latino spike. Like I was like, well, but I did it with my second language, that is English, like you only know one language.
You only want,
like,
yeah, I did it with a second.
Yeah. And I was young and maybe was immature at the time, but I thought I had to defend myself. But I just wonder, like, that's because I was raised to stand out for myself.
Yeah.
But I know that there's a lot of people that just bow their head down to comments like that because you want to belong, like you want to. I have enough friends. At the time in college, I had enough friends that just this guy didn't mean anything to me for me to answer like that. But
it was also because of your upbringing in Ecuador.
Yes, it was.
What were some of the things that your family, that the culture taught you in Ecuador about standing up for yourself? Was that a family thing? Was it culture? What was that?
Well, my dad always said to me, and he taught me this since I was little, you always want to be nice to people because then they can never say anything that you did wrong or it was bad. However, if someone is disrespectful to you, and what you believe, you want to politely tell them that they're wrong, right? So that's kind of what my dad taught me. But at the same time, I grew up, thankfully, I feel like I was blessed because my dad had the means, but he always taught me one thing, no one's less than you, no one's more than you.
Because your dad was an attorney.
Yeah, he still is.
Yeah.
And our nanny is part of the family, like that's how I grew up. I had a nanny and people are like, oh, you had a maid. No, I had a nanny. She was family to me.
Yeah.
It's different. And I think it has a lot to do with the way that you're brought up, and those, things that your parents teach you when you're little, but also how your family is. So I feel really blessed that I got all those learnings when I was little because when I was growing up, and I have to say, everyone's like, your dad's your favorite, and I'm like, yeah, a little bit, a little bit. But he taught me just always to be welcome to everyone, and it might be because I saw him on the political trail and he hugged everyone and he was nice to everyone, and that's just how I grew up. And maybe that's why I was so fearless. And I was like, let me get on a plane at 13 years old to learn about other people's culture.
That value of kindness.
Yeah.
So you kind of expected, like, well, other people are kind and stuff. And
I was expecting the same back. And
Yeah.
when I realized that there's people out there that didn't thought the same way, or maybe their mindset was different because of the way they were brought up, I just had kind of a problem understanding the why. Because at the end of the day, I was taught we're all human beings, regardless. We're all the same, made the same. We go to the grave all in bones, and...
But you started to question the why at the moment he said that.
When I was so young, I was like 18, 19. And I was like, it kind of brings you a perspective. And then you're like, do I have to change a little bit to be more a certain way? Do I have to have less of an accent? What do I have to do to belong? Yeah. And that's the reason why I'm such an advocate now, because I feel like if you're speaking English and you have an accent, people understand you. Like I have, this might be just me, but I have a problem when people are like, well, I can't understand you. And I'm like, but what language am I speaking?
Speaking English.
Yeah. So it's just, it daunts me. I'm just like, why? Like, I understand that there's a language barrier sometimes if it's, maybe really broken. I get it. But be mindful. These people are coming from all different backgrounds for all different reasons, and they're making an effort to learn your language so they can communicate with you. So stop yourself a little bit and be like, hey, can you repeat that? It's all about the way that you ask. That's what I tell people. I don't mind people asking me questions about where I'm from, what I am, because sometimes they're like, what are you? I'm like, oh, well, I'm from Ecuador. What I am, I think. Yeah. I think I'm still from Ecuador, But, they ask the questions wrong, or they assume wrong instead of just asking me the questions.
Yeah. So, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier. So it's, I've talked to you because the term up until the last couple of years, I think in the work in diversity and inclusion, I've heard and seen Latinx. Mm-hmm. And at first I was like, is it Latinx? What is it? And then it was Latina. I heard, and it was mostly I would hear a lot of Hispanic. So I would ask you, I'm like, there's all this identity of
it is
Latin
and
people, individuals, and I'm like, but you're from Ecuador.
I am Ecuadorian. Exactly. And that's how I want people to ask me. I mean, I don't mind people thinking I'm Hispanic or I'm Latino because I'm proud of both things. But at the end of the day, my identity, my culture is Ecuadorian. Like, my identity is not how I look like. And that's what I tell people. Like, in Ecuador, if you go down to Ecuador, you see people from all colors. And you're like, if you see your football team, you'll be like, oh my God, Antonella, are you really from Ecuador? Because I've seen your football team. And I'm like, yes, I'm from Ecuador. Because that's the truth. I mean, we're just people that play football look a certain way. And then you have the rest of the country. Or then it's a mix because we're conquered by the Spanish. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I tell people, that's my culture. My identity is Ecuadorian. Yeah. I'm Hispanic. I'm Latino because, that's just what I identify myself with. So when it comes to labels, I think it's very important just to ask, what do you identify yourself as?
Or because, just say, like, where are you from?
Where are you from? Because if they're from Brazil,
about your culture.
Yeah, if they're from Brazil, they're Brazilian. If they're from Peru, they're Peruvian. Yeah. Like, don't make it so difficult. Yeah. Just ask the person, because I'm sure that if you ask them, they're probably going to tell you, and they're going to appreciate that way more than you just assuming that they're from Mexico. And I have, my best friend's actually from Mexico, and she's like, it also gets that stigma where she's like, why is it a bad thing to be from Mexico now?
So do they start stigmatizing the different
now
Central and South American
countries? And now a lot of Hispanics are like, no, I'm not from Mexico. Like, it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to be from Mexico. It's just assumption that most people that don't know will make if you speak Spanish.
What are some of the stereotypes and the stigmas that that have been placed from you that have I want to get back more to this, your college experience. But what are some of the stigmas and stereotypes that you've?
When I was in college, someone asked me if I spoke Mexican, and I was like, no, I speak Spanish. Yeah. Oh. And I try to be open-minded. I try to be open-minded and be like, maybe they don't know, so maybe I have to educate them. Yeah. So that's why I tell people, just ask me.
Like your dad said, give them kindness.
Just give them kindness so they can say that you were mean.
Right.
But yeah, I've been asked, do you speak Mexican? Or why don't you like spicy food? And I'm like, I'm from Ecuador. It's different.
Yeah. Gives me gas. I don't like it.
Yeah. And then I'm like, did you know that in Ecuador, we actually also go to Mexican restaurants? I go to my family. I'm like, do you want tacos? Let's go to a Mexican place. Yes.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah. So that's good to know, right? Because people here are like, do you want tacos? Or why don't you like spicy food? And I'm like, because it's just not what I eat at home. Yeah. And actually, we made a dish the other day for one of my best friends. She's from Mexico. And she's like, oh my God, this is delicious. And I'm like, yeah, this is Ecuadorian food. It's, it's different. Yeah. So that's one of the things I'm very proud of is our food, and our ceviches are the best.
Ceviche.
Yes.
Okay.
And when my mom comes, next week, we'll make some and invite you,
Okay.
So you can try because it's so good.
All right.
So
ceviche.
Good.
All right. Stay tuned. We're going to tell you all about the ceviche. So stigma stereotypes, it's just like, okay, you're you're all everybody's from Mexico,
Yes.
and you all and and you gotta like spicy food.
Yes.
There's these little things that it's
Little
like,
things.
no,
So you're
that-
like, no.
and they don't get to know each of the cultures of the country. In the United States, we pretty much have a kind of common culture.
Correct. Yep.
All the little states maybe have their little.
And at the end of the day, I feel like if they were to get to know me, they will know that I'm Antonella from Ecuador, who also loves country music, which is, weird. I've learned to love it. I just love it. Yes. But, people will learn that about me. And then maybe we would have something in common that you maybe didn't know that we had before. Because you just assumed that maybe I only like, I don't know, vallenatos and this like salsa music, which I also like.
I love salsa music.
It is good, to dance, but, it's one of those things that I feel like if people were to know me, they will learn those little things, because once you learn those common things that you have with someone who's from a different culture, you get to have something in common that helps you connect, right? Yeah. And then, like, we love people, and we, it's one of the things that kind of brought us together, and that's why we're good friends. Yeah. And then you can respect the differences, I don't enjoy much football, but I respect it, and I sit there for 5,000 hours to watch it. It's
American football.
American football. Yes, American football.
Yeah, you always have reciprocated. And one of the things that I've always admired about you is you've always had a way of eloquently educating somebody whenever they have placed some stereotype on you that has nothing to do with you, culture, where you're from, anything. It's like a blanket identity that they just place on you. And I've always been fascinated how you have been able to respond with kindness to these individuals. Like, actually, it's always been a way that you have navigated how you educate them in that space. I've never heard you downplay somebody or degrade somebody for that, but you've always taken the opportunity to educate them.
Absolutely. And I think it has a lot to do, like I was saying before, my culture and how I was brought up, that, if it's a question or they just really don't know, then I'm going to tell them. And it always depends on the tone. That's what I tell people. How are you asking these questions? Like, are you being condescending? Or are you assuming when you're saying it? Not everyone's like me. So because we're so diverse, you also have to think about their backgrounds and their experiences. And they might probably respond differently. And that's kind of what happens to, some of my friends, that they don't feel so kind when someone tells them, are you Mexican? They're like, oh no, why do you think I'm Mexican? And I'm more like, oh no, you know what? I'm from Ecuador. Do you know where Ecuador is? And then they're like, no, where's Ecuador? Yeah. And I'm like, South America. And they're like, where? Right under Colombia.
I'm gonna stop you guys real quick.
Yeah.
And just move this microphone.
Am I kidding it? Am I hitting
No,
it?
you're just speaking past it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay.
We're good.
But
Put your hair back probably just a little bit.
okay. I'm sorry, they can see my beautiful profile.
So yeah, you've always taken that opportunity to educate them. Now, what about your other friends? I mean, you were a lot of international students went to school here. It's a private school.
Yes.
So I'm assuming if they can get more international students, there's funding. So they've created a nice opportunity for students internationally transitioning from their countries and into American economy.
I would say something that my dad was just telling me the other day, because my sister's coming to school here too. And it was like, America is a place of opportunities, but those opportunities come from capitalism. And what I mean by that is that, yes, I came to school here, but I had to have the means. So
that's true.
So you go back to, okay, how much money do you have to have allocated in the bank for you to even get approved for this visa? Like, people don't understand that there's a process to that. And that process is not insignificant. So not everyone can do it. So not everyone has that opportunity from other countries to come up here as an student. And I hear too often people be like, why can't you just do what you did? And I'm like, because I was blessed.
Yeah, you were privileged.
I was
to
privileged.
Have the opportunities
exactly.
that you did.
I was
It's
blessed,
not like all
privileged.
these international students are just coming here, because it's the same as here. If you've got the money and the means, and you can do that.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I think people don't understand. To get a tourist visa, you need to be medium wealthy to be able to get it approved. And that depends on which country it's from. So Ecuador is 10 years, but India, you might have to wait months before you get approved, and then you only get like 3 months, you know? So there's differences, and it has a lot to do with the political states of U.S. with those countries. But in Ecuador specifically, we used to have a 6 years tourist visa, and it's just changed to 10 years. But you have to prove, you know, income, work, you know, you have to have your tickets paid. If you're going to Disney, you better have all that paid and proof to get your visa approved. So there's a process behind it that requires money. So when you think about all these people immigrating here and crossing the border, or how people say, why can you do it? Why can they do it like you? And I'm like, because they can't. They really can't.
So downgrading individuals who are coming here for survival.
Exactly.
For a better life. And it's like, well, do it like Antonella.
It's not that easy. If it was, it would, you know, I feel like we wouldn't have the problem that we have, you know? So it's a lack of understanding, and it's a lack of education on the subject, because people just talk what they hear and they have never experienced it. I mean, it takes months. You have to apply 9 months, like I think it's 3 months before. Then you have to have all your paperwork. I mean, it has to be notarized, bank accounts. I mean, it's.
I can't imagine the mountain of paperwork you must have had to fill out in just up until this age that you are, and probably just the last 10 years.
Yes.
The mountain of paperwork you have had to fill out.
Yes.
And I'm sure some of it was just ridiculous.
It was. I would never forget my permanent resident interview with my husband, Corey. And we're both sitting there. And our attorney is like, don't laugh, Antonella, when they ask you these questions. And I'm like, okay, what questions are they? So I'm just going to give you some random ones. But like, have you smuggled money into the U.S.? Have
so
you
the
smuggled
attorney's
drugs?
prepping you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm like, they're going to ask me that. She's like, don't laugh, because I know you, Antonella. Don't laugh, because the interview is serious. And I'm like, okay, I won't laugh. So we finally get to the interview for my permanent resident card, because you first get 2 years after you get married. And that's conditional only. Then you file for 10. So once you file for 10.
Can you hear okay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
You're fine. Once you file for 10 years, you have to go to an interview. Okay. Just to make sure that the marriage was in good faith. So me and Corey are there, we're ready. And you have to answer questions. And then they're like, have you ever been a prostitute? And I'm trying to keep my face straight. And I'm like,
they asked if you were a hooker?
Yes.
Oh.
Are you a terrorist? Have you been involved with ISIS? And I'm like, do you think someone would tell you this? First of all, ridiculous. Nobody's going to admit that they've done any of these things. But I thought it was kind of interesting. And people are like, well, that's good screening. And I'm like, nobody's going to tell them yes.
No.
You know?
If you're a terrorist,
probably not going to tell them. But, you know, just ridiculous questions. Like, have you smuggled money into the U.S., drugs? And I'm just like, no. And that's why my attorney prepped me, because she's like, I know Antonella, she's probably going to laugh. And I was like, no. And of course, just like holding my hand, just like, don't laugh, Antonella, don't laugh. And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to say no to all the questions. And it was like 50 questions I had to reply no to. And I was like, no. But the one that was really...
To get your permanent resident.
Permanent residence, yes.
Okay.
Which is not my citizenship yet.
Right.
I can only apply to that after 3 years from my conditional one.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that was that after you graduated college? So you met your husband, got married, and graduated college?
Yes. But as an international student, I did 1 year of OPT, which is optical practical training. That's when you have to work on your field. That's the only way you can work after college.
Okay. So criminal justice degree, and you worked where?
I work at Coleman and Pappas, and I was at the law firm.
Okay, so you worked at a law firm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then I finished that year, and then we got married, and I got my 2-year conditional resident card, and then I was able. That's when you interviewed me, and that's when I started working in recruitment and HR.
What was the so you go from college with the experiences of some stereotyping and understanding. Did you feel that when you crossed over into getting your job and stuff, did it just was it getting better, or did you just feel like it was getting worse, or were you just getting more of those marginalized
I think
hits?
More, and I think a lot of them were unconscious. I'm not gonna say that I might have some that experience that were maybe intentional, but mostly unconscious. I have one that I would like to mention is, and just to give you some feedback, in Ecuador, we say numbers as A16, you know, like for phone numbers. So
Okay.
816-844-2206, my number, right? But back home, we say A16.
816.
A16 instead of 816.
So we say all of it like 0, 1, 2, 3,
Yes.
4. You're like
And
2340.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. And I came from college not knowing what those etiquettes were, to be honest, into the workplace. And I was answering the phone. And every time someone would ask me, hey, Antonella, what's the number they call from? I would say A16. You know, I would say 816. And it was months after I get someone to come close to me and they're like, hey, Antonella, do you know it's 816? And I'm like, no. Like, what's the difference? It's the same. And they're like, but it's not. Like, it was a big deal. And I'm like, but when I say A16, do you understand what I'm saying? And then they're like, you know, so just little things like that. And I'm like, and now working in HR, I'm like, that could have been addressed so much better. Like, for me, it was like, why is this such a big deal?
Yeah.
Like, and then you've been waiting 6 months to tell me? Like, I've been saying A16 for the past 6 months, and that's a problem? Okay. And then I changed.
We say 816 here.
Yes.
Get it right.
Yes, 816. Now I know. But, you know, and then now I wonder, I tell Corey this all the time, do I say 816 because of that? No, I don't know, maybe. But, you know, and it just, you know, that's one of the things that I was like, wow, that's, you know.
You're taking, that's such a small thing and you're making such a big deal about it.
Yeah, and they're like, well, you know, that's in Ecuador, not here we say 816. And I'm like, oh, you know, maybe I need to be more American. I don't know, 816. So that's one of the things that kind of really stuck to me when I was, you know, just, I think, 21 on my first job. And I was like,
it's just how people were approaching you in the workplace.
Exactly. It was just different, you know? I wasn't used to it, and I didn't thought that was the American dream, because I always thought people were more open and understanding and welcome.
And accepting.
Exactly. Because that's how I was raised, going back to, you know, my culture. So, and maybe that's kind of what shaped me to be the way that I am now, that I'm so like you're saying, open, and I'm very, hey, this is, you know, this is why, this is, you know, where I'm from, and this is how you say things, or that's kind of how I approach things, because after that experience, I never wanted anyone to feel that I treated them that way, you know?
Got you.
So.
Did you feel it was because you were from Ecuador that people saw you as, that you think they saw you as, you know, air quotes, quote unquote, Hispanic, or you know, and so they just kind of thought, well, you know, because you're an incredible worker, hard worker, very smart worker, and it was this one thing like, ooh, I can get them on this.
Yes, and then I would have to talk on the intercom, and let's be real, this was like 10 years ago, maybe 9
on the intercom.
Like intercom,
you
like to call people. I did work the front desk to cover sometimes. And I almost think that unconsciously they enjoy every time I call, because I had this accent. So it was funny, because it's harder to understand on the intercom. And they would tell me that like it was a joke, and not knowing that it made me feel bad.
Give us something you'd say.
I would just make it worse on the intercom, because I was trying to be funny. But like, I feel like,
no, I want an example of an announcement.
Clint 614, Clint 614, and then I would say 816. You know, so just going back to the number thing. Anyways, but. You know, 6 months later, they tell me, and I've been saying it on the intercom wrong too. Yeah. So, but you know, at the end of the day, I feel like, no, I didn't feel like it was intentional, maybe unconscious, but that kind of determines how you feel about people and how they treat you and what they think about you. Because now you think you have to be more a certain way than your true self, you know, like. Yeah. So that,
you got to bend to their way. You got to, because did you feel like in that first employer, did you feel like you truly belonged there?
I would say sometimes, and some others not. Like on comments like that, I would be like, okay, well, maybe I need to be more careful on how I say things or how I act, or, you know me, I'm very like upbeat, and, you know, so maybe I need to be more, and I'm American, you know, more like neutral. And, you know, that's just kind of how I saw it. Maybe that's, I'm not saying that's how all Americans are, but that's kind of how I saw it. You know, I have to be more professional, because being too Hispanic is not professional enough.
I'm gonna say this because I think it's a point. Did you feel like the culture with Ecuadorian coming here, did you feel like people here were more uptight?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because, you've always taught me in Ecuador, it's everyone belongs. It's laid back. But did you feel like just people were just more uptight here?
Yes, especially once you get onto the workplace. I think it was more like, this is the way you have to act. Like, this is how you do things. And especially on that first experience, approaching, like, one time I had shrimp at the front desk. And then
shrimp. You were eating at the front desk.
Shrimp.
Your lunch.
Yeah, it was, yes. And now I know that, right? But I was like 21. And then there was this blast email from HR about how we can only have hard candy. And now I'm like, that's ridiculous. It's a front desk. Like, it's not a big deal to have shrimp.
Like, you didn't know that you couldn't eat lunch at your front desk?
No, not anymore after I ate shrimp at that one time. I know. I was like, what? Why can't you just approach me and tell me that? No. You had to be on
a big email.
Yeah.
It was the whole thing.
Yeah. Very corporate, No more shrimp and rice.
And
please,
like, what's the big
hard
deal?
candy only. I know. And I was like, why?
Uh-huh.
It's not a big deal. But, and I do think that kind of taught me how not to be. So I am thankful a little bit of those experiences, but it also kind of disappointed me because when I came here, I thought hard work and was all that it took, Yeah. And now it almost felt like you had to belong and be a little bit different.
You had to be able to fit in some way. You're like, I'm trying to find my way to fit in. I'm just not. So so that first experience, you get further into understanding more about workforce and the labor market.
Yes.
And in that, I think when we worked in that space, we knew we had to be very careful how we navigated through. If a client would call about what their specifics were, we had to be very careful because we would never want to get into any legal situations.
Absolutely.
Because we knew people would say things like, "Oh, well, we don't want people on the bus line.
Yes.
We don't want those people." Or if they might say something like, "Hey, can you?" we need this certain type of worker, none of these types of workers, kind of things like that. We're like, we can't do that.
Absolutely.
And you're paying $9 an hour, so you're going to get what you get.
Yeah.
But I remember, so what has been your experience? Cause that was your, getting into workforce management and talent acquisition and stuff. What was your experience getting into that as a woman from Ecuador, being a female in this space, in this intersection of you being from Ecuador, being a female, and tell me a little bit about those experiences. What your first was just like, holy cow, this is.
I think for me, it was a way to kind of teach those people because I've had calls where they're like, hey, I want, and then they tell me like, hush, because I'm Hispanic. They're like, hey, I want, workers like you. I'm not going to say what they say specifically, but you know what I mean.
I want
like
Hispanic
workers because they're good workers. And what I've learned over, 8 years now is that, as I said again, we're all human beings, and a certain ethnicity is not going to guarantee that you're going to get an exceptional worker that's going to be at work every day.
Because that was the one thing. Because they would be like, "Oh, can we get Hispanic workers? Because they show up for work every day,
and they're hard workers.
They'll be here every day." I'm like, "What? I don't."
It does, and it doesn't matter. That's one of the things I've learned. In every culture and every color of the rainbow, I've learned that there are people that just don't want to work, or are not going to show up, or are not going to have a good attitude.
Right.
It doesn't really matter. And as much as I love my Hispanic culture, I know we're all hard workers, but there's exceptions like in any other race.
In any other race and culture, absolutely.
So you have to tell them that. Say, you have to give this person a chance. I'm going to send you who's qualified. But navigating through all that, one of the things that I kind of surprised me and was I had a supervisor who was Hispanic, and he was getting into X company, and he was like, hey, Antonella, I want Hispanic workers only because I'm managing a workforce.
I want Hispanic workers only.
Yes. Oh. And then he said, because I'm managing a workforce of employees that have been there for years that are only African American, and they don't listen to me. And I'm like, well, have you thought about what kind of leader you are? Have you found things in common with them? I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but I'm going to send you who's qualified. But that taught me a little bit. And then he made this example, which you're going to think is crazy. But he said, well, it's just if you get too many of one or the other, it gets like in jail. And I'm like, what do you mean in jail? Like they just
if you get
too many from one culture and too many from the other culture in one place, it gets like in jail when you have like separate gangs. And I'm like, that's a really weird example.
like in jail, so segregating. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm like, but then you go back to the point that you have to include them. You have
Did that supervisor go to jail?
No. However, we sent whoever he was qualified, and they did a good job. But like, they have to see it, and at the end of the day, it has to do about their, I would say, mindset when it comes to the diverse team. Because yeah, maybe I'm a Hispanic supervisor, but can I relate to something I have in common and earn their respect? Because they have a different culture. Maybe they see me just as this Hispanic boss that just walked in to give all the rules and things that they have to do, but it's the way that you handle it and the way that you approach it. And if you're already telling me that, I can already tell what they think when you are trying to
the bias is there.
Yeah,
you've just put it out there, and now if you're going to go lead them, your bias is it's there.
Yeah. So that was that was mind-blowing to me. And I said, I am proud of being Hispanic, and I know that we're all hard workers, but you have to qualify people by their skill set and their experience, and not their race or their ethnicity. So yeah, it's been quite a struggle, but yeah.
But you do it. You educate in such in a very eloquent way by asking the very logical and also the kind questions, like what kind of leader do you want to be? What are you doing to nurture this talent? What are you doing? So you do make sure that they're putting themselves there first. Correct. To see where their place is before moving on. I want to talk a little bit about, because while you're navigating this new workforce and new career in workforce management and talent acquisition, you're also at the same time you're working on getting your law degree in Ecuador.
Yes.
And at the same time, working full time, you're also applying for your citizenship.
Yes, that's correct.
Like all at the same time.
Yes, I multitask a lot.
So tell me about what that was like, because you would often tell us and share with us about all the paperwork and the things that you had to go through to prove it. It's not an easy process, I think, with people, and I want to educate our listeners on that when we have this, because when we had the banning of Muslims coming here and we, my husband and I and several of our friends, we went out and protested at the airport, you're welcome, when they were putting the ban on Muslims. And so you had, at that time, were really talking to me about how difficult it is. Because, at the time, the Trump administration, everybody was like, oh my God, they're just coming here in floods and all these things and all these negative stereotypes about, people coming here illegally. But it's like that, yes, we do have people that do come here illegally. They're escaping persecution and trying to survive. But to get citizenship, to go through it in a legal way, it is not easy.
No, it's not.
And I think if listeners and people would understand and hear, like, what does it take to get somebody to go through the proper procedures to survive?
Yes.
Share a little bit about that. Share your experience on that, because I think there's a lot of education there.
So first of all, when you start the process, and you have to be a permanent resident first, which I explained before, but that would mean that someone has to sponsor you. So if it's your husband or your parents or whoever is asking for you to be here, right? So that person has to make 3 times minimum wage. So that's about $27,000, $30,000 a year.
Okay.
Think about how many people make that. Most people are, that are applying and are fleeing are maybe at 12,000, 14,000.
They're not making that much.
They're not making that much. So that's one thing. So
you poverty.
Have the poverty level. So you first have to find the sponsor that will be able to sign the affidavit saying that they will support you for 3 years while you get your 10-year resident, which in my case obviously was my husband. And thankfully he was able to support that at the time. But
who could be another sponsor?
It could have been a family member of him.
Okay.
If they were okay with that, which, it seems you're signing an affidavit saying that you're going to pretty much support me for the next 3 years.
Okay.
So it's not something that a lot of people would do
Can
for
it be
someone.
an employer?
It could be if you're going to do an B1 visa, I believe.
Okay.
But that's way more expensive as well.
Okay.
And that's if you want to bring an employer to the workplace. And
Gotcha.
you have to go through a process as well. But this is just immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. So in this case, me and my husband, and I make jokes all the time. What if he worked at McDonald's? How do I come here legally, right?
Yeah.
It would have been impossible.
Yeah.
So after that, you have to prove that you're together. You have to go to the interview. Then you get your work permit till you wait for your 2-year conditional car, which takes 6 months.
Okay.
After you get that 2-year conditional car, you got to make sure that you apply 3 months before your car expires to get your 10-year.
Yeah.
And after you get your 10-year, you have to wait till you qualify for citizenship. When you're married, that's 3 years from the from the day that you get your conditional permanent car. So let's go back to the first one, right?
Oh.
Yes. If you are not married and you're asking for your daughter, you have to wait 5 years. So when you're married and it's directly to a U.S. Citizen, is 3 years after your first conditional car. And if it's not, marriage, and it's just directly like an immediate relative, like your mom or your son, then it's 5 years. If it's your sister, you go to the website for Homeland Security and you have to see how long the process takes. Like for me, it would be 10 years if it was my sister. So it's just one of those things that it takes a long time, and it just depends on where you're at. So
you need a good education.
Yes.
You need a good sponsor.
Yes.
You need a good amount of money.
yes.
To navigate all that.
And then you have to pay the attorney fees. I mean, I was thankful. I was referred to someone who was doing a lot of college students. So she was very nice to us. But most attorneys charge between, $2,000 or $3,000 for the process. And that doesn't include the interview or the filing fee. So every time you file for your work permit, now it's free, but it wasn't before, or you apply for your 2 years and then you apply for your 10 years, that's a filing fee. That's between $800 to $1,000, depending on the year and what the fees have changed. So for citizenship, you have to apply and you pay $1,000 just for the filing fee alone.
Holy cow.
Yes. So after 3 years, I could apply for citizenship. After you apply for citizenship, you wait. Now, on top of that, you have to show that you pay taxes for the last 2 years as well. So you have to show all your W-2s, make sure that you pay all your taxes, federal taxes. Otherwise, you can't apply. So that's another thing. If someone, for some reason, didn't know how to pay their taxes, because it's common on the Hispanic community, and I've learned that a lot through the Ecuadorian Association that I'm part of, that people just don't know why you have to pay taxes. They think cash is better because the way that things work down in Latin America.
Yeah.
They don't know what credit is, or, so once they're ready to go through the process, they don't have any of those things because they don't have the education to know that they have to have those ready.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a lot.
That's a whole lot.
Yes.
And now you have your citizenship.
Actually, I'm applying for it right now.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we just file, and we just have to wait till they send us a letter that, we can go do our other interview to make sure that marriage is still in good faith.
That's the other thing. You have to go through. You're also being investigated with your marriage.
Yes.
To make sure it's like, oh, this is legitimate.
Yes. And then they asked me the questions again, by the way, during that interview, same questions. And then they make me learn 100 questions by heart. And then they asked me 12 now about American history, who's the president now, and just...
Is it this difficult to apply for other countries? Do you know?
For Ecuador, I think for Ecuador, you have to show that you have employment. And you have to have a sponsor there too, not as big amount of money, and where to live and have a job. And then after 90 days, you can apply for it. And then you pretty much get approved within like maybe 4 months. And then you're pretty much a citizen.
Yeah.
If you were to do that in Ecuador. But as I said, it just depends on the country.
Yeah.
But, I mean, U.S. is very thorough. I heard a lot of people being like, oh, the process is too easy. No, it's not easy.
No,
it's tedious.
It's not.
And
And you helped me with that argument.
Yeah.
I know that people like I never got into the argument until knowing
Yeah.
and meeting you. And I, when Trump was running for president and going through the election and everything, and we thought I would ask you, and I'm like, that's not true. I know that. And,
Yeah.
know, but at the same time, it's like, what does it take? And you told me, and then I want you to share a little bit because you had a story where during the whole Trump thing and people couldn't get in and out of the country and of people who were here illegally and not, and there was this major policing at the borders. You had an opportunity to go to Costa Rica.
Yes, I did.
And tell us a little bit about that with work, because you won some award thing. And
Yeah.
but tell us a little bit about that experience.
Oh my gosh,
'Cause
you're bringing my nightmares.
I know, but it speaks to how it dehumanizes the individual.
It does.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So I guess at that point I was a little bit misinformed, but my 2-year resident card was expiring 3 months before my trip. Okay. And when I Googled, I was like, oh, I can travel. I asked my attorney, and she's like, yeah, you should be fine, leaving the States and coming back to the States. She didn't look at the Costa Rican laws. And so I get there. I'm excited about my trip, and I'm passing immigration, and the officer's like, you can't come in. And I'm
To
like,
Costa Rica.
To Costa Rica.
So you get through the U.S., all that, where you're going, and you get to
Yeah,
Costa
so I'm
Rica.
leaving the U.S., and I get to Costa Rica, and they're like, you can't come in. And I'm like, why? And then they're like, because your resident card expires in 3 months, and it has to be valid for more than 6. And it was like maybe like 2 months and 30 days. I don't know. It was pretty close. And then I was like, what? And then they're like, yeah, you can't come in. You have to be sent back to the States. I mean, I was shocked. And then, as you know me, I went to the Costa Rican Constitution and looked at the immigration laws. And I said, no, it's not 3 months. It's 6. And then, anyways, I didn't qualify because mine expired pretty quick.
But you didn't. So you didn't know what's the purpose of the 3 months? It's just their
their law. But I was surprised, and I was like, okay, well, what do I do now? And then they're like, well, we have to send you back. And I'm like...
So that's where the fear hit between how do I get from here...
I was like, are they sending back to Ecuador or are they sending me to the U.S.?
Right, with everything that's happening right now.
Yeah.
And about illegal immigration and everything.
And I was thinking, does the immigration officer in the U.S. going to think I'm smuggling something? Because it's been like 24 hours since I left. And I was like... And I can imagine how people feel when they're coming into the U.S. and they get questions like this and they get in this little room, because all that happened to me in Costa Rica. Like, they're like, oh, so we have to ask you.
You're going in the little room. What happened?
They asked me questions about what was coming to Costa Rica and, if I could travel back and all these things and things about my, my permanent residency here. And I said, no, I can go back to the States because as long as my residency is valid, I can go back. But I got to be honest, I was bawling, crying. I was so scared.
But you have a criminal justice degree and some legal things. You're like, I know how to argue, or at least.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm going back. Like, you have to send me back to States. And then they're like, well, and it was American. Oh, sorry, I can't say what it was. Well, it was through an airlines. And I almost said what airline was. And the funny thing is, I get.
Oh, can we say American Airlines?
American Airlines, too late. Anyways.
Yeah, it's a podcast. It's a story.
Okay. So, in American Airlines. But here's the thing. They look at my passport and they look at my residency card in Kansas City. So they should have told me in Kansas City, American Airlines, hey, you can't travel. So I would have avoided myself all of this headache. But I didn't. They never told me. They just let me go in, with my almost expiring
clearly
thing.
the borders aren't doing their job.
Exactly. So
Except
I'm like...
one, apparently.
Barely, but
Barely.
Yes. So I'm like, okay. So I'm there in the room. They're asking me questions. They're like, okay, well, the airport apparently in Costa Rica closes at midnight. And they're like, our next flight leaves at 6 a.m. And then my legal background came out and I said, that's not my fault. In Kansas City, American Airlines let me fly. So you put me on a plane today. And they're like, well, we can't let you go into Costa Rica, but the airport's closing and we don't have a flight to put you on. And I'm like,
You couldn't even get into the airport.
to get out of the airport. No, I had to be like on the standby zone, like the gates.
Oh.
And then I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, you just find me a flight and you fly me back. And then they're like, well, we're going to try. And I'm like, what do I do if the airport's closed? And they're like, oh, you just sleep at the airport. And I'm like, what? And not only that, but they put an officer next to me that followed me the whole time to make sure I didn't fly into Costa Rica. Like, just run.
You're by yourself.
Yeah,
no
by
family,
myself.
No friends, no nothing.
Nothing.
Were you in San Jose?
Yes.
I've slept in that airport. It's
Oh
not
my
comfortable.
gosh. I was just like, no. And I'm like, you put me in a plane right now. And then they're like, but it's not our fault. And I'm like, it is your fault. I want to talk to the airlines person and I want to tell them that they need to put me in a flight back to the U.S. now. So they found me a plane, thankfully. But I had this
You
officer.
had no guarantee at that point if you were going to get back home.
No, I wasn't. I know, I didn't. And I had the officer next to me, and I'm like, I felt like a criminal, almost. Like, oh my gosh. Like, there's an officer next to me the whole time. I couldn't even go pee without it. I told him, and I said, I need a drink. I know you want to have to be with me, but you're going to have to walk me to this bar because
I need a cocktail.
I need a cocktail
Do
and
you
food.
want one?
Yeah. He's like, I can have one on the job. But he was nice. He was a nice officer. But, like, almost made me feel like I was a criminal. And I was like, I didn't know that I wasn't able to go into Costa Rica with my expiring permanent resident card from the U.S. But the worst thing was the fear that I had being questioned back in L.A. by the immigration officer. Because I was like...
You got questioned again there.
Well, because I didn't. But I was afraid because of the whole thing that was happening. Because I was only gone for 24 hours. Why does an Ecuadorian leave for 24 hours and comes back to the U.S. right after? Like, I wasn't even out the U.S. for more than, like, maybe 24 hours.
So on that flight from Costa Rica to L.A., what was happening internally?
I had all my thoughts and arguments of the whole thing that has happened, so I wouldn't have any troubles in immigration. Like, I was petrified. Because... my family is here. I mean, well, my family's back home too, but my husband are here, my friends are here, my life is here. So I was really scared.
Were you able to communicate with them?
Yes. But here's the funny thing, and I tell this to people because they're like, I'm like, it's immigration officers see hundreds of people and they do the best job that they can. But I'm already all nervous. I've slept in LA. I mean, it's been just a crazy day for me. And I have all my paperwork that I was rejected from Costa Rica just to show them why. Mm-hmm. And I literally go into the counter with this immigration officer. He's not even looking at me. And he's like, what's the purpose of your trip? And I say, oh, I'm just, going back home. Put your left finger. I'm like, and I was ready to tell him my whole argument. And then they're like, your right finger. And I'm like, okay. Look at my paper. Goes, not my paper, just my resident card. Then they go, have a great day. And I'm like, I was like building up for it. I was like, I'm ready to tell you everything that happened to me. And anyway, so I didn't get questioned, thankfully. But, I was surprised because I was only out for 24 hours. It was pretty quick. I mean, I don't look very threatening, I don't think. But, I thought they will ask me, hey, what were you just out for 10 hours?
Yeah.
No, nothing.
So that was another hit. One of those hits that you're like, holy cow. Is it because I'm from Ecuador? Is it because I look like this? Like, why?
Yeah. He didn't even look at me. And I get it. They see tons of people. Uh-huh. So I guess I tell everyone, just hopefully you get a nice one. And then they're nice to you. But yeah, I got no questions. And then it was funny because I was bringing my 2 bags that I didn't unpack, unfortunately. And I'm passing customs, and then the guy's like, what do you have there? And I'm like, you want to know? Like, I was so excited, and I told him all about it. He's like, wow, I shouldn't have asked. Because I was just telling him all about it. Because he's like, do you bring anything from Costa Rica? And I said, no.
No,
it's
it didn't even
stuff.
get there.
No, it didn't even get there. It's the same stuff. Yeah, so it was...
You have a lot of individuals because you work with the Ecuadorian Society here in the Kansas City area. You serve on the board, and you really do your best to be an influence a role model, and then also a resource
Correct.
for those individuals who English is a second language. They haven't had resources to the education to improve on their English.
Yeah.
And you have always been somebody that has educated those individuals who are trying to navigate their way into American culture, society, and the workforce and in the community. And so you serve on this board, and tell me a little bit about, because I didn't even know until meeting you that there's quite a group of Ecuadorian culture here in the Kansas City area. Tell us a little bit about it and what they're doing to create more visibility here in the Kansas City area.
So the Ecuadorian Association of Kansas City has been, I think we're about our 5th year now.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been good, and
because you helped form it. You helped.
Yeah,
get it together.
I did. And when I started, I found out there's 200 Ecuadorians here in the Kansas City area alone, which is a lot. Some didn't want to be part of the census because they probably didn't have papers. So we're trying to keep a safe space so we can get a more, exact amount. But 200, about 200 members is what we had sign up for. And in 2000, and I might be a little bit off on this, in 2017 we brought the consul so they can issue some of the passports and some of the consular IDs is what they call.
Okay.
So they're legal IDs. So for people that might not have papers, they can get those and drive safe, and they can present those as an ID here.
Gotcha.
So that's one thing that we did, and we partnered up with the Hispanic Commerce, I totally forgot.
Chamber?
The Chamber, yeah,
Okay.
the Hispanic Chamber. They were great as well. But one of the things that we're trying to do is teach people about our culture and also educate them. So we also had, before COVID, we had every month we will have an educational class per se, and we will bring people to help them about traffic tickets because, traffic tickets and accident has nothing to do with your immigration status, and people don't know that. So teaching things like that. We also brought people to teach them about insurance and why it's important, or credit.
Yeah, we have a lot of rules.
Yes,
We
you
have a
guys
lot of
do.
rules.
Yes, and then we brought
lot.
brought one about scholarships, and that was great with the Hispanic Foundation. And one of the things that kind of surprised me is how most of the teenagers that were there knew what a GPA was, but the moms, the older generation that came here first and their English was broken, they're like, oh, what is that? They didn't understand that. So helping them understand why it's important for their kids to have a good GPA and how their kids can have access to scholarships, because most schools have a scholarship for either women or minorities. So we kind of give them resources of what schools, and we partnered up with the Hispanic Foundation of Scholarships, and then they did a great job kind of helping with that. Yeah. So that was pretty big, and we actually, the last one that we have was EKC Brightening Your Future Scholarship. Like,
what is it again?
It's like Ecuadorian Association Brightening Your Future Scholarship.
Brightening Your Future.
Yeah.
Okay, scholarship. All right.
Yeah, and the girl who got it, because one of her things was to be Ecuadorian descendant or just Ecuadorian or, something to qualify for it. And she was actually going to UMKC, and she wrote a really nice letter. So she got a whole year paid for law school.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's the first one we gave in 2019.
Nice.
Yeah, so we're doing things to slowly help, the Hispanic community and the Ecuadorian community in the Kansas City area to learn about, how they can be successful here if they don't know how, and also what resources they have at hand that they didn't know they had before because they were too afraid to ask or they didn't know where to ask.
Yeah, just having those areas where you can go to just to get the resources, because we don't know where to go.
Exactly.
And when there's no representation of individuals that you can relate with and understand, then it's almost, what's the point of doing it? I'd rather stay in hiding.
Yeah.
Because I don't see, I can't be visible.
Exactly. And we see that a lot, and that's why we try to be a safe space and, we are pretty open on Facebook, and then they text us, hey, where can I go? When's the consulate open? So we have all that information for them to know.
Yeah.
And maybe before they didn't have that access, where to go, and it could be so simple, like, where can I get Ecuadorian food, here in Kansas City? And then we know of someone who makes great food, who's going to make a big, like, ceviche or
Where do we go?
Well, we have people that make it, like, on their own, so I can give you the contact. But they sell it. It's not like a restaurant here. Chicago has a bunch.
Do they cater?
They might, yeah.
Maybe they could cater a party here.
Ecuadorian food party.
Yeah.
That'd be so good. We make great dishes.
I love it.
Yeah. Empanadas.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so good. Yes.
So how has this helped you see a clearer picture of being here, living here, and working here?
I gotta say that
because you've been here with some turmoil shit. Like,
yes.
you were here with the banning of blocking off the borders with immigration. You've been here through some very tumultuous situations. I hope I'm using that word in the right way. And while at the same time, this last year, seeing certainly in 2020 what we all had to go through and what you were dealing with here as a culture.
Yep.
But also what you were dealing with
Back
home.
Yeah.
As a culture, because your family, you weren't able to see your family for almost a year.
Yeah.
And
It
so
was rough.
what are you seeing now between your countries, America, home? How are you defining all that now? Being this woman in this intersection, female, working on U.S. citizenship, from Ecuador, all of it.
I think it's getting easier, I guess, this year. But definitely last year showed us a lot. I think who was there for you when it comes to friends and family. And I would say back home, at least, I lost my uncle to COVID in March.
Yeah, your uncle was a physician.
Yeah.
And lost him to COVID,
Yeah, he was a physician. And it kind of showed me the support, at least. I had the support of the association where we did something really nice and sent PPE back home. And we had a lot of people donating. So, like, maybe it brought a really good part of people and also some bad parts of people, But I was very impressed about my community riling up for the cause of someone so close to me, people that didn't even know me. So that was something that I experienced last year. And then I think as things evolve with the whole election and all this, I really tried to keep myself away from politics for a little bit. The only thing that I would jump a lot, I think, was when people were like touching immigration subjects, because I felt like a lot of people didn't experience it. And I'm like, you're from a privileged country. Like, people in Ecuador are living out of $1 because COVID is not letting people work.
Yeah.
And like, for me, it was just amazing how people would blame people for fleeing countries where they could barely make a living to feed their kids. So that was very upsetting to me, I guess. And
we saw the ugly side of people give their opinions about that this last year.
We did. And I tell everyone all the time, I'm like, hey, I respect everyone's opinion, and I'm very open to whatever argument you have on politics in general. But if you're going to come into immigration subjects, you better know what you're talking about. Because if you're born in the U.S. and you're privileged enough to be born in the U.S., you have no idea what it feels like to be from an undeveloped country. So when I saw people struggle, family members getting their checks cut to $200 a month is what they were making. And they had to make a living with that and pay all their bills. So I'm like, I can only imagine how other people are having it bad, that they have to flee their countries to America to work. And work in the middle of a pandemic too, like risking their lives. Because I'm very open to the fact that I tell people it's kind of like the lottery. I'm not saying that everyone is going to die, but you just never know. Like, I lost someone really close to me, and that brought up some of people's real mindsets and real character.
Biases, all of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think now I'm kind of seeing things, opening up more and going back to normal. But the stigma and the mindset that they have already shared with me is there. So my opinion, it's kind of already changed about the people that maybe made those comments to me, and not because they were bad people, but just that's the way that they think.
You're just more cautious.
Yeah, I'm more cautious. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Because you seem like you have settled into, I'm not trying to force my way to belong here. I'm being more cautious.
Yes.
And so you've been able to navigate how you're more cautious with your relationships.
Yes.
And everything. And that's really cool. So how's your family today? Where are they? And how are they doing in Ecuador with everything? How often do you get to go see them?
I saw them in December, thankfully, and the experience was definitely different because everything was closed up. And me and Corey went, and the first thing that my mom made us do was take a shower. We couldn't hug anyone because they were scared of us getting them COVID. And we're like, we already had it. And they're like, no, it's dangerous. Don't do it. To go take a shower.
You haven't seen them in a year. Go take a shower.
Yeah, go take a shower. We don't know. But it was very, I would say, just different.
Yeah.
Like I saw, I would say I was surprised. Like they were very happy to see me because of being clustered and just not going anywhere and afraid for a full year.
Yeah.
And then when they finally get to see me, I mean, I had to even get a COVID test when I got there before I could even hug them. And that hug I gave my dad that day was just the best.
What'd that feel like?
Oh my gosh, it was just, I have no words. It was just awesome. And then I was happy. They haven't had COVID for a full year, right? So I come back home. Well, I come back here in January, my second home. And they literally get COVID. I don't know why, because they were just at home. But my grandpa got sick and things happened. And they got COVID February, and I was here. And I've never been more afraid in my life.
Yeah.
Never. And you can't do anything.
Yeah.
So I almost felt like after I got it here last year, I was a little bit, I wouldn't say irresponsible, but more like, I'm fine. But when my family got it, I kind of got to experience, again, what a lot of people were experiencing. Like, oh my gosh, I was calling my dad every day, and I was like, every hour, show me your how do you call the oximeter? Is it oximeter for the oxygen?
Yeah, oxygen. Yeah,
oxygen meter. Yeah. And I was like, show me, take a picture. I want to know your oxygen is fine. So he would have to take a picture every hour. Yeah. Because there was nothing that I could do, and I couldn't imagine my life without them. Like it's just how close we are, and it was an eye-opening experience. Thankfully, they were fine, but it was the scariest 20 days of my life. I could say it like that. It was terrible.
What would you say, and I want to wrap this up, but what would you say, because in the workforce and working in HR that you do, you work as a consultant, is we know that international people who are from other countries, typically if they're going to take time off from work, they usually go for a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks.
Yep.
Because that's family. What do you say to those organizations who haven't implemented any policies to really provide some equitable policies for these individuals to go and see their families for that amount of time?
Well, I think it's important because it shows the worker how important they are. Yeah. And at the end of the day, they're your human capital. They're who's making that bottom line work. So you should, and that's where I come back to the inclusion part. Like they want to feel like their culture and the way that they love their family, and they have to fly thousands of miles to go see them. So if they have 3 days off, that's gonna be like flying back, say hi, and come back. Yeah. So implementing that is just going to create a more welcoming space. Yeah. So if I'm from Ecuador,
more inclusive culture.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I feel like, hey, if I'm applying for an X job, I know that if something's happening, whether it's, paid, not paid, not really the case, but just knowing that I'm going to have my job when I come back, and I can be with my family for 3 weeks without being afraid of repercussion because, I was gone too long. That will be the kind of culture that we want to work on. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of international new students that are coming, to the workforce, and even just minorities want to feel that way in the workplace. They want to feel like they can be themselves. They want to feel like no assumptions are going to be made. And I think that's going to help, when it comes to that. And not only the policies, all that's important, yes, but just humanize this person. That's a big thing for me.
Have the empathy that they don't see their family every day like you do.
Yeah.
They have to go to another country.
And guess what? The other 400 days that they're working for you, they're going to work 10 times harder.
Yeah.
Because they feel appreciated. So at the end of the day, I tell people you have to just be human. You just have to humanize this diversity and inclusion talk, because at the end of the day, you can put all the policies, but if you're managers and you're not implementing things that are going to make them feel, and it's just old talk, then it's not going to make a difference in your workforce at all. So,
I'm glad you're out there in the trenches. You're out there in the trenches of workforce, and you're doing the damn thing. I kind of have a surprise. I want to end this on a kind of a
I like
fun
surprises.
note. Do we have did we'd be in the office, and I love the fact when you started with us, because we get a big job order in of like, we need 100 people tomorrow, and we'd be like, let's do it. Be 5 o'clock, and we get some, we'd get our vodka and our Red Bull.
Yeah.
And we'd always turn on Bon Jovi or something
Yes,
and just
I
rock
love
it
Bon
out.
Jovi.
What's a because you always had a wonderful singing voice in the office.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to try something with me?
Yes.
Okay, what's a song that we could sing together, real quick?
Do you know
What?
"Living in a Prayer"? Bon Jovi. You don't know Bon Jovi? Do you know Bon Jovi?
I do know Bon Jovi, but I don't know if I.
You know the.
Definitely know that one.
You do. Living on a prayer.
We have to.
Okay.
Which wig do you want?
Let me see.
I got this. There's this crazy one here that's just out of control. That's a little Bon Jovi rock starish.
Yeah?
Put that on your head.
Maybe.
This might be a little Bon Jovi. Ooh, I want to see you in this one.
Okay. What's the?
I don't know for sure.
You don't know for sure. I might put it wrong.
This is.
Hold on. I gotta do it all the way. Oh, I have too much hair.
Take a drink of your margarita. What?
Is it wrong?
No, of course it is. There's nothing right about this. Okay, how does it go?
Oh.
Because we're living on a prayer. Here you are, coming up from Ecuador, here in the U.S. Definitely the last few years of your life, Antonella, there's been moments like, I'm just living on a prayer here.
Yeah.
And your mama is down there in Ecuador. I'm like, okay, what? How does the song go?
Living on a prayer.
Okay, we'll just say, oh, we're halfway there. Oh, we're halfway there. Oh, living on a prayer. Take my hand and we'll make it, I swear. Oh, living on a prayer. Living on a prayer.
Oh, that was better than me. I love it.
Okay, Antonella, how can people get connected with you on LinkedIn, and where do they go get connected with you to some great opportunities, resources? Where do they go?
Yes. So I'm gonna keep this because I
Keep
love
that
it.
on. I'll keep mine on. Where
There
do they
you go. Well, my LinkedIn is Antonella Zavala Marcks, and then all my information is there for you to contact me.
Okay.
But I'm also part of the Ecuadorian Association of Kansas City, so we're on Facebook as Ecuadorian Association KC, and we have tons of resources there, especially if you're Hispanic looking for some information. And I also have tons of jobs available, so just hit me up.
Opportunities.
Yeah, job opportunities.
Okay.
Yeah, and all kinds of resources. So
Great.
And if you just need someone to talk about something you feel that you might relate to me about, also,
give us a call. Give
us a call.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so
for
glad
having
you were
me.
here, and
Love
be
it.
looking for Antonella Zavala.